Hello, everyone. Give it a few minutes while everybody joins into the call.
Yep.
There we go. Wonderful. Just one more moment and we will kick off. Okay, fabulous. We still have some more people from global locations joining us right now. Great. Okay, let's go ahead and get started while everybody is still joining in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the L&D Trends 2024, the Future of Workforce Learning and Effective Measurement. This is an EI expert web series. So I welcome all of you. Oh, and we still have more people joining in. Excellent. Okay. I will then move forward. Welcome again. So for today, all of you, I am Kelly Lake. I am the Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer for EI. We are so excited for today's webinar. Very excited to have our two leaders on the call with us today. I'll do introductions in one moment. So we'll kick off with that. Then we'll move into a real quick overview of the industry, just to level set. And then we'll jump into the most important part, which is our trends. And that's the panelist forum, which we'll be able to engage a little bit more on that. And then we'll have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Okay, so just a couple few housekeeping things just to talk about. It is being recorded today. It's scheduled for 60 minutes. There is a question panel within Zoom that please, I would ask you to enter any of your questions that you have. We will again answer those during our Q&A session at the end of the webinar. We also have chat. Please feel free to chat. Our team is on as well and will respond to you accordingly as we move through the webinar. As I said, we're being recorded today. So after we finish with the session, you'll wind up getting not only the recording, but the PowerPoint as well, which will include a couple of our thought leadership e-trends book. So if you haven't had a chance to look at the L&D Trends 2024 ebook, I suggest that you do. It's fabulous. It's very in-depth. We have spent quite a lot of time putting this together based on customers and what's happening in the market and responding accordingly. And also there's an emotional intelligence in the age of AI brief that we will share with you as well. Okay, and these links will be live once you receive the PowerPoints. All right. So I want to thank you all for joining us today. At EI, we are extremely proud of where we are in the market today, and I just want to thank everybody. Our trends that we'll be talking about during the sessions is a high level of the trends. We'll have additional webinars post this that drill down into each and every one of those topics. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. Just for some of you that are joining and maybe for the very first time, just to understand who we are at EI, give you a little depth and breadth of what we do as a leading global full service L&D provider across the board. We are focused on emotional intelligence, and we'll talk about that actually as one of the trends as well, but it gives you an understanding of our customer reach, our expertise, and then also our verticals and our locations as well. So just to give you just a little bit of background for those that are still joining, and I can see that we're doing that. Let's go ahead and move forward. So I am so excited to introduce our two guest panelists today as well, and I'm very excited. So I've been in L&D for 30 years. I won't go any further than that, and very excited to be able to work with these two leaders. So let me go ahead and kick off introductions. So Heather Sutherland, very happy that you're joining us today. Heather is the Global Life and Health Claims Development Manager at Swiss Re. She's responsible for developing impactful learning across the board, people development outcomes, and definitely pushing the edge on knowledge acquisition. If you know Heather, she has a lifelong commitment to creating opportunities for others to grow and believes in curiosity, especially for lifelong learning. So Heather, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Second, also somebody that I'm extremely proud to have, and I'm fortunate because I get to work with both of these leaders weekly. So Soma Bahadre. She is global head of our instructional design for EI, which is amazing. Not only that, but she is one of the driving forces on our solution architect and innovation team, as well as a pinnacle, I would say, a force on our learning consulting practice and advisory services. So I am so pleased. Soma, welcome. Thank you for taking the time to participate today.
Thank you, and I'm so excited to talk about what we have to. Yeah.
There we go. Excellent. Okay. So without further ado, I just want to kick this off by level setting where we are in the market right now. It will help as we start to talk about the trends and the background as far as what we're doing. So just as we know, coming out of 2023, there was a huge push from having skills built in multiple different areas within organizations, ensuring that, we have our commitment for learning engagement, but that workforce enablement component of it has been pinnacle. So most organizations have kicked off different types of skills training. But today we're really looking at what I call right skilling, which means, okay, now that we've implemented this, now that we've seen these in different organizations, what are they doing now? How are they moving forward to ensure that they're able to measure, substantially that engagement? Has it worked? Did it didn't work? What's the contingency plan moving forward? And being able to take a step back and understanding that organizations now are completely aware, for the most part, on where their gaps are within their organizations, are building towards a new culture not only of people centric, but as an organizational culture of lifelong learning, and then focusing on skills. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So moving towards the learner engagement, we talk about measurement. And I will tell you, this is the year of active engagement around the corner when it comes to measurement. Measurement mapping back to business, understanding business goals and how that maps back to learning. We're seeing the change from organizations being very creative in what they're doing to try to encourage engagement, not only from that aspect, but also from talent. How are we retaining? How are we moving forward with that? We can see that we're coming up with new ideas, reinventing some of the other ones, like when we're looking at our learning technologies. You know, we're looking at immersive learning in a different light than we've had before. Not only from that, talking about extended realities and ways to deploy different types of extended realities, which we'll talk about, that are very reasonable, cost effective, and timely. So understanding that it doesn't need to be a very large scale, but you can impact retention on a very reasonable level and obtainable. And I will also say not only obtainable, but sustainable. And those are the important factors as we're working throughout this industry and understanding where we are. Um, we're seeing advancements as we go through with additional technologies, not only from the immersive side, but when we talk about scaling. Even companies are coming back to say, we actually took a foray into AR for the first time, and we were able to do this, and it was successful. And with virtual reality, everybody thinks for the most part that it's not scalable, but it is. Embedding different types of virtual reality, not necessarily headset, but also web-based into different types of learning. So we'll talk about that. And then also the continuation. People say the rise of AI, but it's the continuation. What's realistic happening in the market? What can organizations actually implement internally? Obviously, from a whole entire analytics perspective, we understand the benefits as well, but how does that get embedded into day-to-day learning? And we'll talk a little bit more about that and how we're looking at AI for talent retention. So there's different ways that we're looking at this from analytics, but it's also from engagement factor and all the different types of solutions that we're creating. Whether it's role-based, avatar-based, and we're doing this into, AI-based platforms. We'll talk a little bit more. So I will pause. I just wanted to give a high-level overview before we actually kick in and start talking about our global trends. Excellent. Okay. And thank you. I see our number of attendees have rose as we continue to move forward on this. That's exciting. Okay, so let's get down into the fun stuff. So from this aspect, one of the first trends that we want to introduce, from the panelist perspective, is the continuation of global workforce transformation. We've seen an uprise and a continuation of this, but one of the biggest outputs that we've seen from last year moving into this year is enabling learning with business alignment. what does that really mean, right? So are we aligning our ROI training in a much different way than we've ever had before out of need and necessity? And what does that look like from an organizational perspective across the board? So Soma, let me kick off with you. Let's get a little bit of feedback and thoughts and what you're seeing as well. And then Heather, we're going to bring you in some validation of what's happening within Swiss Re. Okay, Soma, please.
Thank you, Kelly. So as a learning designer, what I see is we will need to rethink and re-strategize training, really, to enable the global workforce. Now, training can no longer be a one-time event, as we all know, or most of us know by now. We need a lot more programs with core and extended learning journeys, a lot more nudge learnings, and refreshers like never before. There needs to be a big boost when it comes to social collaborative learning as well. With this transformation, we see a few skill sets that need a special attention and focus. While there are several, I've picked up the top few. The top of the stack is leadership training, because with the hybrid model and the need for adaptability, we have to have different sets of training that we need to do for our leadership and skill them adequately. Up next comes the DEI training. Now, traditionally, we've just used, one type of series or, like just a single strategy. But here, we at EI are using a blend of strategies to make the DEI trainings come to life. I'll just give one quick example from this year. We've used live actors. We've shot through scenarios just to make the learning more lifelike, more relevant, bring in that human touch, which is so important when it comes to training that needs to impact your behavior, and you need to internalize it, right? Also using DEI along with VR or virtual reality. I mean, that's going to be a new touch. Up next comes sales training and the use of AI avatars, AI voiceover, a very, very lifelike conversational simulation, and rater zones where you can actually upload a sales pitch, kind of a call or a video, and have a mentor rate it. I mean, these are the new skills that we need to equip our sales force with. Finally, induction and onboarding trainings, we need to make it more lively. Use of 360 virtual tours, a lot more augmented realities, virtual realities in use. Personalizing the trainings are so important to make them relevant. Now, one very, I wouldn't say, I mean, I think most learning designers and the organizations have spoken a lot about compliance training. So they need to evolve more than anything or anybody else. With the change in regulation, the integration of AI, the evolving data privacy policies, there's so much more that needs to get into the compliance trainings. So I would say a few things to consider as a learning design expert would be simulations. Consider serious games, which may seem unlikely, but they do a lot better. On-the-job challenges, your video-based learning, and nano reels, and binge watch series. I mean, that's the Netflix style of learning, as we say. So nobody would have ever thought that an episodic style of learning can do wonders, but we've seen that. I mean, we've hands-on experience with that. So yeah, that's what I had to say about this.
Thank you. It's great insight. So Heather, from your perspective as well, right, within your organization and your personal opinion, understanding transformation, right? And we'll talk about skills in 1 second. What does your experience have been in regards to that? And then also, aligning learning with the business itself.
I think that if we look back over the last 4 years, there's just been such a transformation of how we work. I don't think that anyone on this call would deny that we've had to rethink so much about work. And I think that one of the real trends that I've seen within our organization is a real need to relook at how we socialize learning. We've become very we've very much embraced the hybrid model of working from home, working in the office, etc. And I think that what we need to do is relook at how we actually bring people in touch with each other again. I think the other thing that we see is that I certainly have lots of colleagues who tell me that they don't have time for development, and we all have a development objective that we put in place annually. Our organization remains a highly knowledge-driven one. I think our industry is as well. And so there remains a really strong perception that L&D must be formalized. It's got to be based on coursework or something similar. You have to have a piece of paper, a qualification at the end. And so for me, what I wonder is how we might bring learning and development opportunities to life for people who are quite time poor. How do we use team meetings? How do we use storytelling? How do we empower my colleagues to really own that learning happens much more in that social realm? And I don't want development initiatives to overwhelm them. So I think creativity in the way that we ensure continuous learning can be identified and celebrated is really crucial going forward.
Excellent. Heather, those are important points. And as we take a step back and look at that transformation and where we're moving forward, for this year and then also next year, I think a major emphasis, comes back on and taking it one step, understanding our users, our engagement factor, but also how are we going to meet those business goals, right? We are looking at this in totality across the market and figuring out, okay, now that we understand the transformation component of it, driving learning towards the goals and being able to have effective measurement on that as well too. So I'm excited that we're able just to touch the surface right now today. And obviously in our next webinar, we will be delving down very deep into the ROI model and tying learning into business alignment. So I thank you for your inputs on that as well. So as we move forward, I think one of the most important factors for us to take a look at is where are we from a skill building perspective, right? So this trend of organizations being reflective on, how do we become a skills-based organization across the board, where we're actually doing it from upskilling, reskilling, everything else. As I said before, having that right skill mentality, but understanding how that affects, learning and the flow of work. So, maybe Heather, we can start with you and give us a little bit of insight from your side on the skill-based organization or moving towards that type of approach. Please, provide some
Yeah,
feedback. It would be great.
Yeah, for sure. So again, looking back 4 years ago, in comparison with now, is that one of the main skills really revolves around how we as organizations, as well as individuals, navigate the fact that the world is very volatile. There's a lot of uncertainty and complexity and many ambiguities in the environment. And so I kind of have a feeling that knowledge requirements are actually probably more or less the same, but that we've got different skills that need to come forward in terms of transforming that knowledge into the action of the workplace. And that's as a result of these rapid changes. I looked at a few job descriptions just in preparing for the webinar, not because I'm looking for a new job, but what I saw was that in addition to formal qualifications in those job descriptions, and by that, I'm equating that with an acquisition of knowledge, there's also so often the additional mention of skills that are desired, sometimes required, and sometimes even on a job description, those actually appear ahead of those knowledge requirements. The ones that I see so often revolve around agility and adaptability and flexibility. One of the examples that came up again in the post-COVID or during COVID was that there was a high demand versus a lower supply of experienced professionals in my field. And that had created unsustainable salary increases that were being asked for. which meant that companies were opting to recruit for skills and then provide the knowledge training either in-house or via courses. We are working much more on capabilities and looking at self-assessing our capabilities against an organizational catalog, validating that with someone else, and then looking at how do we build personalized learning journeys. Again, coming back to meeting the workforce requirements. The other thing that I would say around skills is that it's very much become on the watch list for regulators in some of our markets, where they are wanting to ensure that we are able to deliver a fair and reasonable approach to customers. You can have great knowledge, but if your style of interacting and engaging with customers is poor, then that can cause difficulties. So that's another reason that looking at skills is crucial from my point of view. We are being directed not just by the regulators, but the reason that they're directing us is because the customers are ultimately at the receiving end, and we've got to deliver well for them.
Exactly. And that's the other point, Heather, and you raised some really important factors, is that what happens around the customers are concerned for skill building for them. So there's a duality and a responsibility that we have, right, to help organizations and our customers grow, to reach the right skills, right? And so these are important things. And someone, as we look at our customers and what we've been doing across the board, and lucky enough to be in a lot of global organizations and working with them strategically. Let's, if you wouldn't mind sharing just a little bit more, right, on the skills perspective as well too, and then also, how the flow of learning within work has evolved, right, since last year, because I think there's some nuances that would be great to share with the folks on the call today, please.
Yes, thank you. And Heather, some very, very important points that you shared. So we're now really talking about one of the most critical aspects as far as I see in the learning landscape. What's more important to emphasize here would be that we need to create an agile and responsive workforce, really, right? Someone that's equipped to, sort of tackle the challenges that are coming up in the dynamic workspace, and equipped with a wide range or variety of skills. So there's a need really for a transformative approach. Now, why do we say that? So first and foremost, right skilling impacts performance, and there's a direct correlation to the ROIs or the ROEs, which is return on an investment or a return on effectiveness, as we say. And to do that, the first thing that we all must relook is relook and then start redefining the KPIs, right? The key performance indicators, to really see if they are aligned to our overarching business goals. Now, while we are driving transformation, it is also important for us to focus on the fact that attrition needs to be reduced, right? And for that, we need to develop a growth mindset in retaining talent. And that will play a crucial role, as I see, especially this year. Cross-skilling the industry skilling or equipping your employees, the learners, with market relevant skills can be a game changer. And how I see this year evolving, and as we move through the year, skill-based organizations, as I see, would thrive on a self-directed learning strategy. What does that include? So your personalized learning path, the learning communities, mentorship programs, AI-driven learning journeys, the adaptive learning journeys, introducing AI and ML into your learning platforms. All of this will play a critical role when it comes to the self-paced learning strategy that we so often talk about. But having said all of this, how do you promote this culture of continuous learning for a skill-based organization without disrupting your regular schedule of work? So that's where we come in, and we use a term, LIFO, learning in the flow of work, right? So it becomes very important. And how do we do that? So we can introduce action-based learning, as we say, right? So bring in the real life significance of what you are teaching your learners. It's so important to promote business scenario-based learning as opposed to the earlier scenario-based learning until probably last year or 2 years back. And that makes the experience so much more contextual, so much more meaningful. And while all of these strategies may work brilliantly, here's a word of advice. We should always go back and check the effectiveness of the LIFO strategies that we've already initiated. And especially if you have a geographically dispersed workforce, it's so crucial to check whether the strategy that you thought worked best for your employees or learners are actually, making the impact that you've envisioned. So yeah, those are some of the things that I see, Kelly.
Absolutely resonates, Soma. Thank you so much for that. As we're looking across and we're providing input as well on how to develop that, right? What's successful model look like? Also from the KPIs, I can't stress enough for the folks that are on the call to please revisit. We're seeing this in so many different organizations where, you would think that KPIs exist or have been outdated or, are using old archaic models and that do not work when you're mapping out a whole entire framework for ROI to map your skills to your learning to your business strategy. So I thank you for that. And I think it's very important for us to consider that as we move forward. Okay. So moving to the next trend, very high level and near dear to our heart, happens to be the evolution of emotional intelligence. And then coupled with that is a responsiveness for instructional design to advance as well. And we know that there's different skill sets with the instructional design component of it and how we look at it from emotional intelligent perspective. So not only do we need instructional designers, but they've morphed into experiential designers that have morphed into, more of the immersive design perspective, and we'll continue forward with more of the AI background. So there's that natural progression that's happening. And I think maybe Soma from an emotional intelligence and the instructional, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit of your views on that, and then we can have Heather jump in because I know that these are some areas that are very important that people have requested to talk about.
Yes, thank you, Kelly. Well, yes, this is the topic closest to my heart. Now, first, we must acknowledge that with the evolving business goals, our learners not only need to be equipped with skills that they need for their new roles or evolved roles, but also the necessary emotional intelligence to be able to navigate that, right? There are a whole bunch of complexities, and probably we don't even tap most of it as learning designers. So corporate learning methodologies, as we see, now prioritize a lot more of emotional well-being. It incorporates mindfulness practice. We have emotional intelligence workshops and a lot of personalized coaching to be able to help people in this direction. Some of the simple ways in which we can integrate emotional intelligence into training, and I am specifically speaking about things that we do in practice, is create learner-centered designs. I can't stress enough about this, right? EI's very own learning and performance ecosystem that forms the ideology of all or most of our training solutions is based on this premise. And it gives a beautiful combination of forming a strategy to formal learning modalities, which then transfer into performance support mechanisms, and then to a very, very robust feedback and analytics. Now, this can be tied to a personal learning strategy pretty seamlessly, right? With instructional design being at the core of any training program, and I keep saying this to my team as well, we're the fulcrum. We need to evolve. And what this means is learning has to be conceptualized with performance outcomes in mind. Now, instructional design to be aligned to the modern workforce, we need to really emphasize on real-world application of knowledge. There has to be, we need to embrace technological advancements and understand that our learners need continuous upskilling and reskilling to be relevant. So there's a whole lot of focus that needs to go on digital learning strategies, on promoting digital literacy wherever that's we see fit. Similarly, instructional designers must also must know how to craft learning experiences that surpass the generational gaps and cater to our multi-generational workforce. Now, how do we do that? So we need to factor for multiple strategies and modalities when we're designing our learning programs, right? Give a blend of flexible learning paths, give a variety of options that learners can choose from. So it could range from online modules to workshops to mentorship programs. And of course, social learning is always a plus in these situations, right? And finally, a very, very crucial aspect is to have inclusive instructional design. And this is extremely, extremely critical for uplifting a diverse workforce. Now, cultural diversity, accessibility, and localization. These are the three factors that we as instructional designers must consider when designing any kind of learning. And at EI, we have very robust practices as well, that guide our instructional designers. But what we're constantly doing is, looking at the learners, taking feedback from customers, and then evolving, ensuring we are relevant and we stay updated. So yeah, that's a little bit on what we can do in this area.
There you go. Absolutely. Soma, thank you so much. And again, it's the pinnacle of what we're doing in the industry, but also from how L&D leaders are moving forward and understanding. I mean, last year was such a big push on emotional intelligence, and we're starting to see that, people talk about doing that, right? So, Heather, if you wouldn't mind just, providing a little bit more insight from you. I know that, this is something that we've talked about together. So if you wouldn't mind sharing with the participants, that would be great.
Sure. I come back to what I said earlier about the volatility of the world that we're in. There's so much emphasis on change, needing to keep up. We've talked about skills, regulatory influences, the tech aspect. It just sometimes feels as though there's this continual treadmill of change. And I think that it's important that as instructional designers, we remember that there's a lot of emotional bandwidth that gets taken up with just being on that treadmill of change perpetually. You mentioned these other roles that one takes in instructional design. The one that I would probably want to, or that one that I've begun to think around for myself and what I do, is also bringing change management principles into what it is that I deliver. So how do we raise awareness of the need for change and the want to change? And then how do we actually create that knowledge to change? And I think, all of that very much goes into how do we create the space for personalization so that can be really, really empathetically attuned to where our individual learners are, especially from a resilience point of view. I just think that the emotional resilience part of always needing to feel that you've got to keep up with new things that are coming along the line can be exhausting for people. And I think that's where having the space to personalize is crucial. Right. Because that's where one actually finds that emotional connection. And you're able to become more self-aware. You're able to manage the emotions, manage the stress, particularly, Soma, as you were saying, using additional skills like mindfulness, potentially being able to take your learning opportunities for a walk around a neighborhood, podcasts and those kinds of things, to be able to go and do that learning next to the seaside. My goodness, that's an amazing additional way of meeting people where they are. It's people we design for, and we've got to remember that.
Absolutely. The whole entire human factor is so key. And as we talk about this, and we have a couple more trends to go through, as far as when we talk about artificial intelligence, I think one of the biggest challenges that for emotional intelligence is educating leaders within an organization the importance of it, and tying the learner back to the leaders so they can understand the importance of the human factor and the importance of that emotional responsiveness. And it's a responsibility that we all have within our organizations, our role. So it's not only from an instructional design perspective, right? It's educating, it's providing, even though we're aware of it, we do this every single day, it's educating the decision makers why that's important, how that affects business outcomes and measurability for an organization. So I think that's one of the major challenges that I think a lot of organizations are facing in the market right now. So thank you both for contributing and providing just a little bit more information, because I think it's important as we move forward. Okay. So our next trend, we're starting to get a little bit more into the technology. And again, these are just high level. Again, we go into great detail and for these different topics, and a little bit beyond what we're doing today. We have been looking at the clock, making sure that we can cover everything that we need to. So we start moving into realizing, from a technology perspective, we've evolved. A lot of organizations are now starting to optimize extended reality and, taking digital learning, and I struggle a little bit with digital learning because it sounds so non-aggressive, or not even that proactive for learners. So I think redefining what we need in the market as far as engagement is concerned, right? We have, like Soma said, multiple generations, and what one designer would do to roll out to everyone may not be appropriate per the vertical or the organization or the strategy for growth for the organization. So that's really too. So you have to take in so many more components within developing, you have your basic learning strategy, which has been expanded, as we all know, into an immersive strategy, and now we're embracing extended reality. So we're evolving, and the skill set for all of the L&D leaders, evolving as well, right? So it's important that we provide education to make decisions in the market. So it's educationally sound. We're making a good decision. This is right for my organization. This is how I can see it move forward. Because a lot of what happens is that you come up with a great idea, right? I'm going to roll this out, and you get to the decision makers and the stakeholders, and they don't quite understand the benefit, right? So what does that mean for organization? So with the extended realities, right? So we get talking about the benefits of what does that mean? We've seen immersive learning across the board, but are we also, taking a look at what we've done in the past? And so, I'll ask you to talk a little bit more about, some of the challenges that we've faced, moving forward with augmenting, certain types of immersive learning. But for the whole entire extended reality component of it, right? So we're talking about not only augmented reality, which is, level setting or laying over, as we all know, a reality, and even to having virtual reality, which completely replaces, whether it's a headset or if it's just a visual, a web-based walkthrough, or mixed, where it's a combination of both. I think that this year we're going to see beyond more how we're taking those different types of extended realities and pulling them into our strategy, and actually using shorter versions, even like with the web-based VR, we're actually able to bring them into learning paths pretty seamlessly now as we move forward. And then I'll talk a little bit more when we get the AI, some of those elements. But I think best practices for us, what we can convey for that trend is, and how it's applicable, because we've moved from trends to realities because we're living this every single day. What does that mean? And I think that's important. So maybe Soma, if you wouldn't mind just talking a little bit more about, the immersive side of it and what we're doing and some benefits across as well. And then I think that might help. And we can drill down a little bit more, Heather, into what does that look like realistically, right? Soma, please.
Right. Thank you. So I'll touch down upon how best we could optimize, what we call as immersive learning strategy into multiple digital learning formats, right? And practically, how could you use that? So the first thing is start looking at creating these immersive learning experiences. Seek opportunities, look for, what kind of strategy would work best for the environment that you are in and the training that we're trying to create. It is also important to look at, like we said, we don't need, or you may have limitations when it comes to gadgets, but you have to get out of that mindset first. There are web-based methodologies, and we can help you with that. So we have a mix of augmented reality, virtual reality, or mixed reality. And one of the things that we quite see many of our customers, or when we talk or consult, not leveraging our learning experience platforms enough. Most of these modern learning experience platforms, or LXPs as we call them, play a crucial role in delivering these immersive experiences, and you could do so much more with that. But there's a little less lack of awareness, or not always are we harnessing, or utilizing it to the best of our ability. So that's where I would, stress a little more on, really looking where and how you could use your LXPs, or if you are, looking at buying or, procuring or changing your existing LMSs, then do, take a look at these aspects. Then, of course, with the digital learning formats, microlearning would never go out of fashion. It's always been that, the go-to learning strategy when you really need something which is very meaningful, but to the point and precise and crisp. And now we have the more modern version, so we call it nano learning or reels, right? I think I don't need to explain this in the Insta age what a reel-based learning might mean. And as swanky as it sounds, it just keeps it short, sharp, precise, and truly supports just-in-time learning with so many different formats. So Heather just touched upon one. You could have a lovely podcast that you're listening to, but learning something very meaningful, and it doesn't matter where you are. So that's one of the strategies to look for, or the formats. And then you have games and game-based learning, which comes next. So our recommendation would be, push the envelope and bring in some more challenges, bring in strategies and gameplays that would excite your learners and that would motivate them, positively, of course, bring in positive competition, and provide them with a very safe environment that allows them to practice, not forgetting the concepts, but allowing them to then achieve something. I mean, the sense of accomplishment when you win a challenge, but that's just a quiz, and you certify without being told, well, you have scored X, Y, Z, and hence you have certified. So not making it so cryptic. The game-based learning just works beautifully when it comes to making learning more engaging. But always don't forget to make that learning mobile first, because it's always at hand. It is always way more accessible, and you will see learning moving faster than one ever imagined. Finally, then we could go for something more complex with the formats like simulations and or interactive video-based learnings. And here, what it allows us to do is really layer multiple decision-making junctures within one single learning unit and provide diagnostic feedback that allows the learner to reflect, think, make informed decisions in the next step, and then really allow them to explore the learning. Rather than making learning more prescriptive, we are making the learning more adaptive based on their decision. So, and all of this in a very safe online environment without any negative impact, right? Beautiful retention, excellent recall, and when we see them going back to the workplace, or trying to apply that these learnings in their real life situations, it's so much more impactful because of the practice that they've got. And we've seen especially simulations work beautifully when it comes to business verticals like healthcare, manufacturing, aviation, hospitality, where it's such a critical, these are such critical industries, and you don't have a scope for any error, or a small error might be life-threatening, right? So yes, these are some of the things, or some of the avenues that you can explore when it comes to the immersive learning, or the extended realities, as we call it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And think that, for those of you that are on the call with us today, or on the webinar today, we will dive deep down into this topic more substantially on webinar, because there are so many different examples and best practices that we can convey, but it's where we're evolving to in 2024. So keep that in mind, wherever you are in your whole entire learning life cycle, whether you're just starting, maybe you have success, you've measured it, maybe you're not able to measure it successfully, where that is, having that conversation and hearing what other organizations are doing, I mean, that's pinnacle in understanding how to move forward with your learning strategy, or even your immersive learning strategy. So Heather, over to you, just for, any insight that you can share, would be really helpful, in regards to, what's worked, what could be working, or just your viewpoint on that, please.
So I was absolutely one of those ones who thought that you needed to have this fancy digital headset that is being shown on this slide to be in with these extended reality learnings. And so I've been grateful for, the eye-opening that's happened for me in terms of the fact that it's just such a very much broader topic. I think that when I look at the world that I work in, there have historically been difficulties with getting buy-in, both from colleagues as well as from our clients in different parts of the world, just for pure e-learning modules, because there's been, problems with enough bandwidth, with internet, in some parts of the world, electricity shortages, which mean that, things cut out. Kelly, you were talking earlier about some of the risks, even in the US. But I can absolutely see how scenarios can augment learning. One of the situations, which I don't think we've embarked on yet, but I could definitely see it working, is around remote onboarding. Experiences like, how do we use our HR systems? How do you book annual leave? How do you use a workflow system? And to be able to actually walk through that, click through that almost in real life, I can absolutely see that's kind of scenario learning. If you are having to go and visit an office for the first time, you talked about, just looking at it from a picture point of view. And so if you're able to walk your way to an office from a public transport base, if you can have a view of what the foyer is going to look like, who you need to talk to in order to get the pass to go to the right floor, etc., etc. I think that all helps to reduce the stress, especially if you also know where to find the coffee machine. Similarly, I think what I'd love to be able to do is to get to the point of using AI analysis. And again, we're going to talk to that still. But if I think of some of the typical conversations that our colleagues have with customers, coming back to the customers as being king and queen, we need to understand how those conversations flow. I'd love for us to be able to build simulations that mimic some of those really common conversations, potentially bringing in branching scenarios and similar things like that to incrementally upskill especially new joiners who may be feeling somewhat intimidated and daunted by having to deal with people in moments of quite acute stress and distress. How do you actually enable them to feel confident to handle sometimes really quite challenging situations? And I think that this kind of this trend that we're talking about here, with just optimizing digital learning, with or without the extended reality part of the phrase that we've got here, is absolutely key.
Absolutely. So Heather, you just walked through some really wonderful examples, in regards to that. I'll just bounce back and then we'll just jump into AI real quick before our Q&A. But the concept of being able to have your virtual tours for pretty much anything that you could possibly imagine, and having that, we developed so much of it, but organizations thinking about how for 2024 and beyond, what's the next step for them? What makes the most sense? How can we have more engaging kind of approaches where the learner is doing, exploratory, self-exploratory as getting familiar in their own time, in their own way, by us being able to look at things a little differently. So I think that is pinnacle, what you just talked about. And I think it's important too that organizations understand how easy, but what the step forward is, right? And what learners are expecting. We've gone through the whole entire approach from, the industry focusing on the business in totality, right? The business, what we're doing, how do we drive that, back down to the local business units driving that per vertical, whatever it might be within an organization, down to the learner. And now we're seeing a full holistic step back in the market from a trend, and again, reality, into we're looking at everything now. We're looking at how everything fits together, communication fits together, and the value add for that, not only from a learning strategy, but from how technology is able to augment that to be more successful, to yield return on what I call return on performance. So I think that's pinnacle. So last but not least, and I'm just making sure we're on time, we'll cover this pretty quickly because we will have a designated AI webinar to talk about this a little bit more. But as we talk about modernizing our learning technology stack, we've gone from our ecosystems evolving every single year, and sometimes numerous times within a year, from we've gone from organizations doing everything internally themselves to outsourcing pretty much everything that they touch, to lack of communications between systems for an ecosystem. How does that work? How do we make a smarter ecosystem? And AI is definitely, there are core areas of benefits that I would like to focus on from the AI perspective of it. And again, we understand legality risks and everything else with certain aspects of it. But for a quantitative analytic perspective, so many organizations have been using it over the last several years to benefit from a more holistic approach to productivity, to standardizing operations, to really utilizing that and cascading, as we've seen, over this last year and a half, I would say a little bit more aggressively this last year, is how do we utilize AI within learning and performance itself to benefit what we're doing, to understand and there are a lot of great nuances when we're taking a look at AI more effectively. Something as simple as AI being created within an office. So I'm going to talk about this in from a storyboard perspective or the development perspective, all the way to having different types of AI role playing where you're actually using a 3D avatar. We do this to be able to do branching scenarios, and then now having 3D avatars available, but also having what we call human-like interactivity. We were joking before the webinar that we may be all AI driven, not knowing that we're actually talking through everything. So there are so many different things. And then the integration with AI platforms. And we've seen new AI platforms from the extended, LPX or the interactive, learning experientials, to building it into the back end for analytics, then also being able to recommend the learning journeys proactively, and then, into actually adaptive coaching platforms, all driven by AI. So again, these are positive things that we can utilize moving forward in best practices. And then also understanding, working with organizations like we currently do, being able to provide how to enter into, safely into AI in these discussions, for organizations. So there's a lot of discussions going on, but I think if we can take this for just a few minutes, so I'm going to just talk a little bit more about from the AI aspect around instructional design, that would be great, and cap off, Heather, with you, and then we can move into Q&A, excuse me.
Sure. So how I look at utilizing AI would be to analyze personal skills and provide personalized recommendations when it comes to skill development. And that will help us in providing more efficient learning experiences we can customize learning to the core and really provide learning that is absolutely meaningful and necessary for our learners at that point in time. And this I see as one of the biggest advantage that we as learning designers, and especially instructional designers, must know how to harness. AI can also initiate redirecting and helping the learner in becoming more engaged by recognizing their patterns. So, throwing up learning that exactly like how we browse, right? So instead of pushing the learning, or rather, instead of pushing the learning, it has to pull the learner. And that's what definitely is a benefit that I see. Organizations, on the other hand, can leverage continuous learning analytics that they can derive from their LMSs or LXPs or various other surveys and methodologies, and make decisions that can help them rectify any learning strategy that may not have been working very well so far, and see how they can improve learner experience for their employees and staff base. Also, as the year progresses, Matrix AI will really help transform the way we learn and manage content, even create content to a certain degree, I would say, and also help us align with technology much better.
Excellent, Soma. Thank you so much. And Heather, just a quick moment just to add anything that you would like to the conversation, please.
Just really that I think that we I still certainly need to learn how to use AI. I think that despite its surge, there's still a fair amount of suspicion, maybe caution around it. And so that for some people, there would still actually be a lot of work needed in how to use AI. And that includes knowing what it's good for. It also includes knowing what needs caution. And so I guess that can be summed up by saying that we need people how to use it to its best advantage while watching out for risks.
Right.
That's probably enough.
That's perfect. Actually, now we're moving to Q&A. Some of these questions that have been submitted have been already answered, which is great. So I just want to wrap up with two more questions. We talked a little bit more in regards to skill sets for organizations as they start to move forward. One of the questions came through, Heather. I'll ask you to answer this: is how do you overcome the challenges of being able to work with stakeholders who may not support the development of a cultural change within an organization?
It's a really, really good point, because we all have different rates at which we navigate change. And I think I would come back to what I was saying earlier around something which I don't know that I've ever seen actually written about. So maybe there's an opportunity. But it is around how do we actually integrate sound researched change management principles into that whole process of moving along. There's so much research about who are the right communicators around change. But I think it is absolutely to acknowledge once again that we've got people, and that people move at different paces. You get your early adopters, they can absolutely tell the great stories, but there will still be people who you have to drag kicking and screaming.
Exactly.
And that is the part of the challenge that I love working with people. People are my thing. And it's how do we work together and tell the stories to be able to move the organization eventually along. But
Perfect.
it depends on the size of the organization, but you're not going to be able to move everyone in one great lump.
Exactly. And I think that's really important for us to talk about. Just real quick, we are at the top of the hour. Everybody will receive the webinar recording, also the PowerPoint with the links in it as well. There's a slide in here that has Emma in it. who is our avatar and talks about immersive learning. So please do download the app, have fun with it. Also, just to wrap up where we are right now, I want to thank you all for attending. We were able to highlight, high level, a little bit of everything we'll be talking about. We will have our next web series with Brandon Hall, which will be March 14th at 11 a.m. Eastern, which is a next-gen ROI and effective measurement. We will have two of our award-winning Brandon Hall companies with us as well on that. So and I have been working due diligently throughout, especially with Swiss Re on ROI, next-gen ROI. So we're very excited. So I thank you all today. I appreciate you being here. If we didn't get to all your questions, we will follow up with those questions within the email back from our teams as well. So we will provide you all the information that we covered today. But please do read the 2024 Trends ebook that we have. It goes in detail into all these different topics and more. So with that being said, I wish everybody a wonderful day, evening. I appreciate everybody joining from a global perspective and the timing, and I am grateful to our two leaders on the call with us today, providing their expertise and being able to take us to the next level within 2024. So I wish everybody a great day, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks,
Thank you,
Kelly.
Heather.
Thanks so much.